It was a 4,880 mile round trip, and this year's 2021 Easter Jeep Safari in Moab, Utah was nothing short of epic. There were rollovers, lots of V8 swaps, and some of the coolest features I've ever shot. I'm very excited to show you some of the content that's going to be coming to the channel and talk to you a little bit about the challenges and some really surprising features of my 2020 Jeep Gladiator Rubicon. Hope you guys enjoy. Okay, so let's talk about the challenges of wheeling a Gladiator in Moab and just in general. Now, as you can see, I have some new love here on my back bumper and on this lower guard here for the bed. I definitely worked out not only the receiver on the back of this thing, but the back bumper and both sides of the skid guards here. Now, that's not a big deal. I don't mind. Matter of fact, I kind of left this so you could see it. I'll touch this up with some black spray paint. You won't be able to tell. That I'm not sweating. The big takeaway here for me was 37s with 3 inches of lift. It's much better than the 1-inch lift in 37 combo I was running, but you still have a lot of departure angle here that you have to tend with. Now, I wheeled with a handful of Gladiators while I was out in Moab, and most of them were on 40s. Now, there were a few on 37s that were kind of battling the same stuff. The guys on 40s were definitely taller lifts, and even with the taller lifts, with the ones on 40s, they were still hitting their receiver. And we were on the same lines, on the same trail, and there were definitely obstacles that they could conquer a lot easier than I could. But the big takeaway here is, you know, I don't really think the great solution is lifting this thing to the moon. I don't want to bob the bed because I still like having a usable bed, so I don't think that's going to be where I want to go. I have a solid axle S10 that essentially we cut way super high, all the bed overhang, and took off the rear bumper and did a super high clearance setup in the back, and that still allowed me to have my full bed. I mean, this is a fairly new truck to be chopping up that way, but I really like wheeling this thing. It's a lot of fun. It's super comfy. So part of me wants to figure out a good solution for this. Right now, there are aftermarket bumpers. They're a little bit tighter to the back, but they don't really do anything about the receiver being low, which is really the point you hit the most. So I don't know. I kind of, where the flare splits and you have this plastic part here, part of me really likes the idea of taking that out and just doing something super high clearance and tight to the back. But we'll see. Just for you guys curious, definitely got into it a lot. The other thing that I hit a lot were my lower control arms and the lower control arm mounts. Part of it is just kind of a low, long truck. You know, even with a 3-inch lift, it's only an 1.5-inch lift coil in the back. So it's not a huge vehicle by any means. Definitely got into the sliders a little bit. Nothing huge. Now, my primary objective in Moab was to feature other people's rides for driving line, which often equated to me not getting as much footage of my Gladiator on the trail. This is just par for the course. Now, given this year was a shorter trip for me, I wasn't able to do as many trails as I had hoped, but I did manage to squeeze in Metal Masher, Behind the Rocks, Hell's Revenge, Onion Creek to Rose Garden Hill, and even spent some time snow wheeling in the La Salles, as well as playing around in sand dunes. It was a very nice mix of technical wheeling and scenic driving. Now, if you recall from my pre-Moab video, I had put on a Rugged Ridge tonneau cover, and I was hoping to replace my soft top with my hard top. Well, I actually did put on my hard top before I left, but I did not end up driving out to Moab with it. Why? Well, the rear glass was leaking pretty bad. Bad enough that I said, you know what? I think I'm going to chance just driving out there with the soft top versus knowing if I end up with a ton of rain, I'm just going to have wet camera gear, and it just wasn't worth it. Now my local dealership is awful, so I went out of town to Big O Dodge, which is actually who I purchased this from. They are a fantastic dealership, and they were able to get the top off, do the leak test and all that stuff, got the warranty approved. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the glass fast enough. As I'm filming this right now, the top is actually, they've got the glass in, so I just got to get everything over there to them to get it all swapped out. They were super helpful, but unfortunately, went out there with a soft top. Not a big deal. Soft top actually sealed up very well. We had a ton of rain going out there. Never had an issue with that. Really glad that I actually did keep the soft top on that. In terms of the hard cover, as you can see now, everything is cleared out. I've been cleaning up the Jeep. So funny story about this hard cover. It has worked great for keeping stuff out of the elements. Now, I started, I think the second day was raining a lot, and I started seeing water getting in here. I was like, oh, I cannot believe this thing, brand new cover, it's leaking. Well, it's not the cover's fault. If you recall, a few months ago, I installed a sort of AA Products bed rack system on here so I could put my rooftop tent on the back. Well, I knew when I pulled the pads off that they had put a slight depression in the plastic top rail up here. Didn't look like a lot. Well, it's just enough that water could leak through where the pad depressions were. Did not realize that before I put the top on. Drove all the way out there, had an issue with dust and water getting in. Wasn't the top's fault. I came back, cleaned it all out. I was just like, what in the world is going on? And then I realized. So I'm going to add some additional foam here underneath the landing pad to cover up where my slight depressions are for that. But just one of those things that happened, no fault of the cover. Matter of fact, Rugged Ridge was super good with customer service. Sent them an email and said, hey, listen, I've got a leak. What's going on? You know, did I do something? Did I install it wrong? Did I, do this? And I'm like, hey, take some photos of where it's leaking. We'll be happy to help you out and see. And I did. I leak tested. I'll put the photos here, and you'll see it's coming in randomly on the side one spot, and it's where those landing pads for the tent go. So one of those things that found out the hard way. Fairly easy fix, not a big deal, but figured it's worth mentioning. One of the funny things that happened somewhere along the line, I don't know what's happening. It seems to be working fine, but half the LEDs on my tailgate stopped working. I had a few other Jeepers telling me that, so hopefully it's figured itself out. But really no problems with the Jeep. The trail grapplers did awesome. I ran 10 PSI all week. Could have gone lower, I usually do, but the combination of the long wheelbase and I don't have hydro assist, I decided to go a little bit higher, and it never really kept me from doing anything. I was worried a little that I was going to get into some of those exposed bolts on the bead locks. That never happened. That was kind of a movement for me. I mean, that's maybe the only negative of the AEV bead lock is it does have a sort of an exposed bolt head versus something that's being countersunk in there. So I was a little worried about it, but never had a problem. That was great. I mean, I will say the Jeeps that I followed on 40s with the Gladiators, it definitely helped having that bigger tire on there. There was a few out there on 42s as well. I'm not ready to make that move. I do not condone 40s and stock axles. I've seen them fail too many times. I know these axles are supposed to be stronger and all that stuff. Just not going to do it. It's not for me. I have a friend, Cooper. We did a follow-up with him. You guys might remember we shot his JL 2 years ago, and he was running 40s and stock Rubicon axles just to see how they would break, what would hold up. And 2 years later, he's still doing it. Now, I did a full video, and he talked to me about all the changes that he's made, the challenges, the parts that have failed. And so it's not without risk, that's for sure. And he'll be the first to tell you, this is probably not a great idea, but I kind of just want to see what's going to happen. Either way, really like the Gladiator platform. I think that the way the rear suspension is, it doesn't give it as much articulation as a Wrangler, but what that has equated out in my opinion, is a lot of stability on off-camber obstacles, and it feels great, really planted on hill climbs. So overall, very happy with this thing. Trail grapplers hooked up well. JKS suspension rode very nicely. I really just don't have any big complaints with the products that I've put on this vehicle. So excited to show you guys some more stuff that I shot out there. Had one close call with a guy rolling down a hill. If you've seen this video before, the backstory is basically he was coming down high dive on behind the rocks and actually had a brake line just fail. It essentially busted off from the caliper. I mean, it was clean. It looked like someone just taken a razor blade and perfectly sliced it. And it was an older gentleman, super nice guy, was coming down. I think he just wasn't expecting that pedal to go to the floor like that. And by the time he realized what was happening, the Jeep already started to tumble. But got it righted. He was okay. He finished out the trail, vice gripped his brake line out, and it was all good. That was the most, I guess, heart racing moment of my Moab. But really good trip. You know, Moab is always a place that can be as hard or really easy as you make it. It doesn't have to be super aggressive. It's funny, a lot of the picturesque trails out there aren't very difficult, but the ones that are like Pritchett Canyon, where you're really down in something and it might not be necessarily as epic of scenery, I mean, they're super challenging and just a lot of fun. So now, just to give you a quick look at some of the features headed your way, shot a handful of very well built Gladiators, all with a mix of parts, and a very cool LS powered TJ that is on 42-inch trail grapplers. In the mix of that, there was also a race Gladiator Mojave, and of course a few Wranglers that you'll be seeing coming very soon. So a couple quick things. Number one, in terms of oil, I'm using a Redline synthetic. And really the only reason I want to mention that is I've always been really cautious with these 3.6 liters about consuming oil. I had a 3.8 liter back in the day that ate itself and I had to replace. And the 3.6s, some of them have been known for burning oil. So that's in the JK, not in the JL or the JT platform. But I'm cautious about it. So I checked my oil when we got there. I checked it when I got back, changed it, did not burn a drop. Really excited about that. Never had any overheating issues, no issues out of the transmission. In terms of performance and fuel economy, the vehicle never felt like it was struggling, but we did have a few days of really strong headwinds. And when you're trying to keep that posted speed limit of 75 miles per hour, the Jeep was working hard. There were a few days it just wouldn't go into 8th gear because it was working so hard against that headwind. That being said, total fuel economy ended up being a little bit over 16 miles per gallon. That includes all 4,880 miles of on-road driving, off-road driving, and stop and go, highway, everything. So I say that's not too bad for a Jeep on 37s with 488 gears. I mean, it's not like this thing's very aerodynamic. It was weighed down with, you know, everything that I had in it. The stubby front bumper probably doesn't help the aero at all either. So overall, I would say that's not terrible. It's kind of par for the course with these Jeeps in general. I'll say two things that I had to address. One, the tailgate popped open once on me on the trail. That was really peculiar. There was something in the latching mechanism. I could hear clicking and it just wasn't engaging. So that was a little odd. Hasn't happened again, but you know, something to I guess be aware of. The other thing, now I paint marked all my bolts before I left on the trip, which really saved me a lot of time every evening making sure all the stuff was tight. The only thing that I had come loose was after a long day of wheeling, the rear sway bar link bolts came loose. Quick and easy fix, but I was a little surprised by that. Other than that, this thing was solid. You know, I was a little on the fence when I sold my JL Rubicon Wrangler to get this. And I was like, man, did I make the right choice? You know, I knew the JL was a good platform. That Unlimited works really well off-road. It was super low, 2 inches, 37s. I like that Jeep a lot, but ultimately I had to make up my mind if I wanted to build one of these. You know, I couldn't afford to keep the JL and keep this. I had bought a Gladiator for a daily driver, and then I thought, well, maybe I'd build one. So yes, I still have my Gator Gladiator. For those of you guys that subscribe to the channel, it's still here, still on 35s. It's just more or less like a dad car for me. And this is sort of the build. This is the thing that I'm wheeling when I'm not wheeling my S10. I like this more than the S10 right now because it's a lot easier to drive. I don't have to trailer it. The S10 sucks on the highway, not in ride and comfort. It just doesn't have a lot of power to roll 40-inch tall tires. So this thing I can just get in and obviously just drive it just about anywhere. So I've got a big trip coming up later this year that's going to be another basically cross-country adventure to do a very iconic trail. There's your hint there. And trying to decide what else I want to do to this thing to, you know, get it ready for that trip. Do I need to do anything crazy? I also have something headed my way that's going to be sort of an exclusive that I'm going to be testing out. You'll see pretty soon. So I'm excited about this platform. I'm glad that I jumped into it, and I think if anybody's on the fence about going to a Gladiator, if they're a Wrangler owner, I think it's great. I mean, I had a Tacoma. I've had a Colorado ZR2. The Tacoma was fully modified, fully locked, front and rear, gears, bumpers, the whole nine. And it worked awesome off-road, but it didn't have a lot of highway oomph to it, and it was a little rattly. This is way better than that. My Colorado ZR2, it was okay, good truck, but it was going to take a ton of work to try to get it to just even basic Rubicon stock level where you could just toss a 35 on. So that's sort of my 2 cents on that. But thanks for listening to my tangents of my adventure. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it informative. Please like, subscribe. If you have any questions for me, you can always find me at Ollie Mansour Editor on Instagram. And I hope I will see you guys on the trail soon. Take care. Bye-bye.